Everybody. I'd like to introduce our last, but not least, speaker of the day, and that is Deb Wilson. Prevention Resources works very collaboratively with Hunter and Warren Child Assault Prevention, and we are actually their host agency. And Deb Wilson is the coordinator of the Hunter and Warren Child Assault Prevention. So she's going to be speaking to us on helping our children be safe through prevention education. Deb, take it away.
There we go. Sorry. You said my first couple of lines, so that's great. Thank you so much. I am certified and trained in all curriculum within CAP, Child Assault Prevention. My educational background is in elementary health and PE and psychology. And I also wanted to thank Prevention Resources and the Harvard Family Success, Harvest Family Success, because they are my affiliated agency, my fiscal anchor. They give me so much support in networking and marketing, and I greatly appreciate what they have done for me and for the program over the last few years. But before I get started with CAP, I just want you to pretend for a moment, and I'm going to pull up my video or my PowerPoint. I want you to pretend that I actually am a representative for the Center for Disease Control, and then I'm here actually to talk about a disease that has hit the community. If it hasn't hit it already, it's on its way. So some of the statistics that you should know is more than 3 million children were affected last year. Those numbers are rising. Some children, some victims are under the age of 1. Over 28 children in the United States die each week because of this disease. Average age is 7 years old. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 boys will get this disease. It's harder to detect in boys than girls. The disease is not always recognized. You can't look at a child and see that they have it. Some children have it for 7 years before it's discovered that they have it. It could be hereditary, meaning that you could pass it on to your son or daughter, or they could pass it on to their children. It could be contagious. So if one family member has it, other children within that family may also have it. The treatment is really tough. Many victims don't seek treatment for this disease because they're usually met with disbelief. There's a stigma associated with this disease. There's a lot of denial within a family, and the treatment can be very painful, long, physically and emotionally exhausting, draining. Some denial of this disease can actually lead to substance and alcohol abuse. And people have actually even taken their lives because of that feeling unworthy, unclean, undeserving. So what are we talking about? I'm sure you all can guess. It is child abuse. And what do we have to combat child abuse? Well, the only thing we really have is prevention education. So how do we talk to our children, our young children? CAP is a program that we actually talk to children from preschool to 8th grade. So how do you do this without scaring them? I hope after the information I'm going to give you today, you're going to join with me in the belief that prevention education is really the only way that we can combat child abuse. And I also want to say to the other panelists, your topics fit in so nicely with what we do with CAP. You know, talking about trusted adults and resiliency and the ACE study. They're all so important, and they tie in so nicely. So thank you for that too. Okay, so CAP is a school-based primary prevention program. We view assault as a violation of basic human rights that we all have, those rights to be safe, strong, and free. We talk about bullying, we talk about stranger assault, we talk about known adult assault. There has been numerous studies about CAP. The last one, or the most recent one, was the Rutgers University study. They took children who had had the program, compared them to children who had not had the program. And what they found is that children who had the program had greater levels of self-esteem. They were more apt to be able to recognize an abusive situation. And the third thing, which I think is so important, is it opened up lines of communication between children and their trusted adults. And especially in today's world where everybody's on their personal devices all the time, there's not a lot of communication. I think that this is wonderful, that it is opening up those lines of communication. Okay, so how do we do that? We empower children. We empower children by giving them age-appropriate information. We want to dispel the myths. We want to teach them the realities. give them strategies so that they can be more assertive, and not just give them strategies. We want to empower them enough to be able to use those strategies. And also we give them resources to lessen their isolation. All right. We are nationwide. We're actually worldwide, 11 countries, 16 states. But the actual CAP program began in 1978 in Columbus, Ohio. It was in that community that a second grade girl who was attending a parochial school was raped. And as you can imagine, the word got out in the community and the children began exhibiting signs of being fearful, bedwetting, fear of being left alone, nightmares. Hey, the kids were not feeling safe in their own home, in their own community. And the adults turned to the only organization that was doing anything in this field. You didn't talk about this in 1978, but WAR, Women Against Rape, was doing wonderful things with adult survivors. That's where this program really began. In 1985, Columbus lost their funding. New Jersey was the model state. We had the first statewide implementation of CAP. Governor Kane was in office. He saw the importance of our program and he made us a line item on his budget. For over 35 years in 9 different administrations, we've been able to maintain that funding. And I think that that says a lot about our program. Also, just as a little footnote, back in mid-October, last October during the pandemic, $11 million was cut in the state of New Jersey for school-based programs. And CAP was not even considered being cut. So again, I think that that shows the value of our program and the reputation of our program as well. Now we're in 21 counties, so that means we have a county project in each and every county, including the city of Newark, and we have about 200 facilitators that are trained and certified and go into the schools within their community and present workshops. So the first thing that WAR was doing when they were looking at, originators were starting a child assault prevention program, they said, why are we successful with WAR? What are we doing? Well, the thing that they were really doing is they were dispelling the myths and they were teaching the realities. They knew that you couldn't prevent something from happening if you couldn't understand how it was happening. So what were they doing? Well, they were teaching women the realities, right? Some of the scenarios, these might be beliefs that we still have, but this is all based on myths. We've got that young, attractive woman. She is in a dark alley at 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe she's on the outside of a bar. She just came out of a bar. She's dressed in scantily dressed, right? Provocatively, wearing a halter top, a mini skirt. She's approached by a stranger. He sees her, he's overcome by lust, and he hauls away and he assaults her. So what WAR was doing is they were teaching the myths that are involved in this or in this scenario. But for years, this is how women were basing their defense on how to protect themselves, right? The realities are actually quite different. The reality is it's about power and control. Having power and control over somebody else, it has nothing to do with lust. Doesn't matter how attractive, how young you are. We've had victims as young as 6 months old and adults well into their women into their 90s that have been sexually assaulted. Dark alley, that's not where it happens. It can happen anywhere. And it doesn't matter what you have on. And I'll tell you, 50 to 60% of the time, that woman knows their assailant or their offender. The assault takes place in the home of the victim or in a familiar setting. So if you think about it like that, that's the realities. If a woman is expecting to be raped on a dark alley at 3 o'clock in the morning, she is not thinking of that possibility of that happening to her if somebody she knows knocks on her door. But the likelihood of that happening, that's more likely and it's more dangerous. Okay, so what they did, WAR looked at child assault. And we had similar myths about child assault and our beliefs on how that was happening. You think of that cute little pigtail girl skipping home from school. She's approached by a stranger. He's probably a dirty old man wearing a raincoat, driving a white van, a beat up car. He offers her something, candy, puppies, directions on how to, where to go. And he kidnaps her and he assaults her. So what the originators started looking at is what are the facts? Also, we knew the reality is far from the myths. Okay, the facts are boys are assaulted as well as girls. The national statistics, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 boys will be sexually assaulted by the age of 18. Some statistics or studies actually have said 16. Now, when I give you that statistic, that is not just rape against children. That is all sexual behavior against a child. So we're talking about molestation, voyeurism, exhibitionism, forced prostitution, forced pornography, and then, of course, rape. Now, assaults against children happen everywhere. A lot of times we think it's that deserted street where there's nobody around. Actually, there can be a lot of people around. What strangers are looking at is they're looking at that child that's somewhat isolated. They're with a group, but they're kind of have lagged behind. They're, kind of off to the side. I want you to think about malls and amusement parks, crowded areas, the zoo, a carnival, that type of thing. That is a great place for a stranger to grab a child. How many times, I know I've seen this, where I've seen a child being carried out or they're walking out and they're crying, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's just bratty behavior. They don't want to leave, but we don't know that. A lot of times strangers will grab a child and they know that, number one, they're not expecting a child to resist. And number two, they know that most people will not intervene. 85 to 95% of the time. Now, we just talked about stranger assault, and I'm going to talk in a minute. It is important to address stranger assault. We hear a lot about stranger danger, but 85 to 95% of the time, that child knows their perpetrator, and actually they're in a loving, trusting relationship with them. Over half of the cases of abuse against children is, again, familiar setting, home of the offender or the home of the victim. Males make up 96% of offending children or victimizing children. Now, that doesn't mean that females don't do it. We do believe that females, the reports against females is underreported. We know it happens, but we know that it is more men. Again, has nothing to do with the sexual act. It's an issue of power and control, having power and control over somebody else. Now, remember, I just said 85 to 95% of the time that child knows their offender, okay? But stranger assault it's the exception, but not the rule, but it is also the most deadly. Somewhere along the way, adults and children have gotten this idea that if a child complies, they're going to be okay. They'll be safe. We'll see them again. And we simply know that this is not true. A perfect example, I don't know if you remember this, but a few years ago, there was a girl in Florida, Carly Bruscia. And the reason why I remember this case in particular is that when Carly was missing, and this man who abducted her was missing, they showed a videotape of her walking behind a car wash, and they showed it over and over and over again. And this man simply approached Carly. She did not resist. She did not yell. She just simply walked away. Like, I can remember being convinced that she knew him. We know that stranger assault, if a stranger can get a child from point A to point B, the likelihood of them not coming back is really high. We probably will not see them alive again. So it's really, really important for us to talk about stranger assault, but we also want to be real and say that it's more likely that it's going to be somebody that they know in a trusting, loving relationship with that child. All right, some additional statistics. In a nation of over 300 million people, there are about 867,000 Tier 3 registered sex offenders in our country. Now, this is the tiers under Megan's Law. You're probably familiar. Very quickly, I'll just say Megan Kanka back in 1994. She was 7 years old. She was right here from New Jersey, Hamilton Township in Mercer County. She was abducted, sexually assaulted, strangled, and murdered by a neighbor who was a convicted sex offender. Her mother advocated for a law, and what this law does is the sex offenders are supposed to register within their local law enforcement when they move in and out of an area. And they are categorized as tier 1, 2, and 3. What they look at is what is the possibility of this person reoffending. So 1 is that it's low, they probably won't do it. 2 is they could do it, but 3 is they're going to do it again. And again, like I just said, 867,000 tier 3 in our country. Locally, I want to say I have 100,000 are unaccounted for. What happens is a lot of these sex offenders do not register. The ownership is on them, so they don't register. They fall through the cracks. As far as I know, right now, to date, there is no way to track them if they go from state to state, if they don't register with their local law enforcement. I'll give you an example of this. Up in Alpha, near a Quick Check, it's on the left-hand side before the Quick Check in Alpha, there is a barber shop. He is a registered sex offender in Pennsylvania, but he has a business in New Jersey. And a lot of people don't know that. I think another important thing is we need to do our homework. We need to know where these people are. You can go on the New Jersey State Police website. You can do a geographical search. You can do a name search. They'll put up, there's a picture up there. It shows the statistics about them, what their offenses are. I live in Bethlehem Township here in New Jersey. There's 3 in my township. I know where they are and I keep track of them. So it's really important that we do our homework. Now, what happens a lot of times with these incarcerated offenders is they may have to serve time in a inpatient sex offender treatment center like Avenel. Avenel is down in Middlesex County, and it houses 700 sex offenders. And what they try to do is they teach them empathy. They have videos, they have individual and group therapy sessions, have them reading, that type of thing. My personal opinion is it's really difficult to teach empathy. These people do not even recognize the negative consequences that their actions have on their victims, nor do they care. So a lot of times what will happen is they'll serve their time, they will get out, and they will find that their family and their friends have turned against them. They have nowhere to go. And so then they're housed in hotels and motels in the area. I know in Flemington, there's a few, in Washington, down in Annandale, Lebanon area. I already said 57 in Washington, up in Phillipsburg. So now you pack up your family, load up your suitcase, and you go on vacation. FamilyWatchdog.us is actually a website that a parent told me about. You can put on the destination of your vacation, and a little map comes up with little red pinpoints as to where they are. And again, we need to do that. Okay. So the other thing that originators looked at is, why are children vulnerable? And they came up with 3 reasons. And they said, you know what, if we put these vulnerability points into a program, we can help empower our children. The first is that they lack information. I think this is obvious, actually. A lot of times adults don't talk to children about this, especially young children. Maybe we're afraid of scaring the child, or maybe it's out of our own fears. But when you think about it, young children from a young age, you can ask them the fire rules of stop, drop, and roll. They know it. They know that. They know that when they get into a vehicle, they have to be in a car seat. Then they maybe move up to a booster seat. They know that everybody in the vehicle has to have a seatbelt on. In the state of New Jersey, they must. It's the law. Okay, so we talk about that, but we don't talk about personal safety for their own bodies. Yet there are more victims of child abuse and neglect than there are on all the motor vehicle and fire in and I think that is like a horrifying statistic. Now, again, we don't want this information to be scary. We don't want to frighten them. We want to give them positive strategies to keep them safe and to empower them. When we talk to a child about crossing the street, right, we don't want to scare them. So we're not going to walk up to the street corner and say, you know what, you see that Mack truck right there? You're going to step off this curb and your blood and guts are going to be all over the place. Of course not. We would not want to do that. We take them to the street corner. We talk to them about looking both ways and seeing what the traffic is doing, making sure vehicles aren't coming. We talk to them about the traffic lights and how the vehicles are supposed to respond to those lights. We're giving them empowering information, and that should be the same way about keeping their bodies safe. Give them that information. The second reason why children are vulnerable is they lack empowerment. And excuse me, a lot of times people will say, oh, today's kids are so empowered. You've got to be kidding me. We're not talking about empowerment to stay up as late as they want or be on their personal devices as much as they want. We're talking about empowerment for their body, to keep their bodies safe. Now, again, as I said, we want to give them that empowering information, but we also want to teach them to be empowered enough to use that information. Children, and we don't teach disrespect, but what we do teach is that children need to know that adult authority should never compromise their right to be safe. Sometimes an adult in their life may lose that right to be respected. Think about it. Children are dependent on adults for everything: food, clothing, medical care, housing, but they're also dependent on a same group of people who could harm them. And it's important for them to know that if that happens, if there's ever a time that they don't feel good, if something just doesn't feel right. In fact, with the young children, we'll say to them, if something feels yucky inside, it doesn't feel good, you have the right to go no and go no, go and tell a trusted adult. And I think by lessening their dependency actually increases their vulnerability to abuse. So I think it's important that they know this. Now, I always tell the story of the babysitter. I have 4 kids. When they were little, they were very close in age. And I can remember getting a babysitter and lining the kids up and saying, listen, mom and dad are going out. We don't want any bad reports. You do whatever that babysitter says. What if that babysitter says, you know what? I'm going to take off my clothes and you're going to take off yours. We want children to know that it's okay, even if it's someone in authority, to say no, no, go and tell. Okay. The third reason that they're vulnerable is they're isolated, and we want to lessen their isolation. Children think of their peers as friends, somebody that they could just go to and have fun with each other. But what CAP wants to do is we want to encourage them to be there for each other, to share experiences, to talk. I mean, as a woman, especially, I can't tell you the number of times I've sat around somebody's kitchen table, or they've sat around my kitchen table and we've talked about different things, processing or just venting. Kids need to do that too. And they also need to know that there's a whole community support. When we do CAP, we just don't go in the school and do workshops for children. We also train the staff every 3 years, and then we train the parents each and every year that we're going in. We have to offer a parent workshop. That's so that they know what information is going to be presented to their children. And that way too, we're getting the whole community on board so that they can be there they can be trusted adults for the kids. So we use the community-based approach. And that community-based approach also is, if one child in the community is in danger, then all of our children are in danger. Recognizing child abuse, I'll just go over this very, very quickly. Many of you are professionals. I'm sure you're very aware of all these things, but a lot of times children don't tell us that they're in crisis. They show us. Changes in behavior might be red flags. It could mean that stress in their life is causing, the stress in their life from abuse is what could be causing the stress. Not always, but I'm just saying it could be a possibility. Different types of abuse: physical, obviously they're the visible physical marks, neglect, and that's purposefully withholding those things that we talked about. Food, clothing, medical care, housing. And it's really important to understand that that's different than poverty. Poverty, they don't have a choice. They're not choosing to do it. They don't have the means to do it. Emotional, that's hard to detect. What we're talking about, belittling, putting down, name calling, that type of thing. And that can stay with a child for such a long, long time. And then we have sexual, which is for sexual contact. Physical symptoms, burns, scrapes, burns. The thing about physical symptoms, you really need to ask yourself, does the story fit the injury? That's really, really important. Activity habits, nightmares, inappropriate sexual behaviors, alcohol abuse, substance abuse, suicidal ideation. That was spoken about earlier with Susan. And we're seeing that younger and younger in I can say honestly in Hunterdon County. We're seeing it in elementary and younger grades. And again, we're talking about extremes here, things that are happening over a long period of time, things that are very pervasive. Age inappropriate behavior, regressing back, thumb sucking, bedwetting, having accidents, bowel accidents or urinary accidents while they're in school, something that wasn't going on. Educational, this is tough because some children will rise to the top of their class where other children won't. They will fail academically in school. So it differs from child to child. A child who's not able to concentrate in class or is falling asleep, that could be related to stress. Maybe they're not getting a good night's sleep. Maybe they're being abused at night. The emotional indicators, depression, fearfulness, phobias, chronic ailments, anxiety. The other thing I didn't mention about physical symptoms, we're seeing a lot of anorexia, bulimia, gastrointestinal issues in very, very young children. And that to me is really a red flag. Now, Susan mentioned some of these things about trusted adults. And when a child comes to you, we talk to them in class about trusted adults that they have in their family or in their life, not just family, because in school as well. When you see these things on paper, they look very easy. I can tell you, and many of you probably know too, if you have a child sitting in front of you telling you a horrific story that's going on in their life, it's really, really difficult to sit there and be calm. But you have to remember that they're coming to you, they've identified you as the person they want to talk to, and your reaction is going to make a difference. If they see that they're upsetting you, they're going to shut down. They don't want to upset you. And children who are frightened, they need that calm and that reassuring words and actions from you. So always be calm. Believe the child. Okay, you want to listen with a very non-judgmental way. I believe Susan spoke about that as well. We believe the child. With CAP, when we can answer the who, what, where, when was the last time, then, if it's a reportable, we must report it. I'm not the judge, the jury. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a police officer. So once we can answer those questions and, we feel it is a reportable, somebody else will take care of that. Another agency will take care of that. Okay. And also, we don't want to interrogate a child or interview a child. Every time a child has to talk about something, some abuse that's going on in their life, it's like they're being re-victimized. So we want to be sensitive to that as well. Use the child's language. Again, they could use explicit terminology. Be prepared. It could be uncomfortable. Don't avoid a child's description. Let them talk about it. That means don't avoid embarrassing subjects. Again, if they sense your discomfort, they're going to shut down. And I loved what Susan said, because we say this too. Tell me more. Tell me more about that. I think that is really, really important too. Don't project or assume anything. This is so, so important. Especially when kids will talk to us about different things that are going on in their life, it's easy sometimes when they start. I'll give you an example. It's easy to start thinking the worst when they come to you. We had a little boy come to us. He was very upset. Every time his grandfather came, he touched him. When did you see him last? I saw him last weekend. I'm going to see him this week. I see him every weekend. I told him, no. Have you told anybody else? I told my mother. What happened? Well, she talked to him, but he still does it. Very important question. Point, and always say point, because if you say show to a young child, they will show you. Point to where your grandfather's touching you. That was it. To him, it was a big deal, okay? But it became, thankfully, a problem-solving thing. On the flip side of that, we had a little boy come to us and say, my daddy puts his peanuts in my ground. He was being sodomized. We had to ask him to point to the ground and point to the peanuts, and he was being sodomized. I always say to young parents from a young age, I didn't grow up in that generation where we use the words penis and vagina, but it really is important to do that. You can teach children from a young age, to use those terminologies. They don't use them all the time, but there have been times that cases have been thrown out of court because we couldn't identify what some of these cute names are, right, for body part names. So you want to make sure. The objective's always to access the safety of that child. That's the priority. Is it safe for that child to go home? Validate the child's feelings. You can tell them, this must be very upsetting for you. I'm so proud that you came. This must have been difficult for you. You can't really say, I understand how you feel, because, we haven't gone through it, but you want to definitely validate their feelings. Let them know it's not your fault. If you forget everything else, I have had adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse come to me and say, if one person believed me, if one person said to me, I'm not to blame, it's not your fault, that person has a problem, their whole life would have been different. That's very, very important. There's so much blame and guilt and shame associated with this, with children. Let them know that they have the right to be safe. Hurting a child is not okay. And let them know what action you're going to take. You can't promise what somebody else is going to do, but you certainly can tell what you're going to do. Don't we want to know as adults what the next step is? And just two things that I stand out in my mind. When I first came into CAP, CAP confidentiality is huge with CAP. And I can remember children coming to me and saying, well, I'm going to tell you this, but I don't want you to tell anybody else. And that's so hard, because at first I thought, wow, I'm breaking their confidence. I have said to children, in life, we all sometimes have to ask for help. And this is one of those times as an adult, I have to tell somebody else, you're not feeling safe. And for me to get you some help, I do need to talk to somebody else. I've had kids say to me, you seem so nice, I want to go home with you. Little do they know that they go home in my heart. And when I put my head on my pillow, I'm thinking about them. But I've also said to them, well, you can't come home with me, but I certainly can sit here. I can be your friend. It's going to be a different day. Somebody might want to come and talk to you, and I can sit here with you. Everybody knows the law, I'm sure, in New Jersey. We're all mandated reporters. Doesn't matter if we see it in school or if we see it in ShopRite, we must call. And if we call in good faith, we are protected under civil and criminal liability. If it is found out later that we knew about it and we did not report it, we are considered a disorderly person. It's a misdemeanor fine of 6 months and or $1,000 fine in jail. Oh, and I just wanted to say, thank you very much. I'm trying to stay on my time. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I know that caring for children in today's world is incredibly difficult. And whether you're a parent or school staff or a professional dealing with children, we all want our children to be safe, mobile, and independent people. And I just want you to think, if that time ever comes that you're a trusted adult that's been identified, it is a compliment. It is a privilege. It really is. If they ever come to you, I want to share a poem that a child sent to us, to CAP. And I just want you to think about this. I'll try to read it in case you can't really see it, but feeling closed in and cut off from life, I told my parents, who told me to tell my teacher, who referred me to my guidance counselor, who sent me to the assistant principal, who informed the principal, who said I should go back to the teacher, who told me to speak to my parents. So please, I want you just to really think about that. If you ever are that person identified, it can make a world of difference in a child's life, with them coming to you and you being there for them. So, and remember what those adults have said, who have survived it. If one person had believed me, and was there for me. My whole life would have been different. Thank you very much.
Thank
Here's my contact information. If you have any questions, feel free.
And Deb, real quick, thank you. I love ending on that note of hope that we can get each of us individually can give hope. There are two questions I want to ask you if you can do a very quick, like 30-second answer. One is, what are the signs of an abuser who may not have had any instances on paper, I guess, been charged?
What are some of the instances?
What are some signs of an abuser?
Oh, fine. Well, I would say of an abuser, a lot of times there's a whole grooming process. You know, they want to earn their trust. They might start out small and taking them under their wing, maybe a little extra attention, gifts, you know, that type of thing. There's a whole grooming process. They don't dive right in it. They test the waters at first to see what is the likelihood of this child agreeing to go along and whether they can keep secrets. Does that answer your question?
And we also have your email there. And the other question is, this might be better for email because I'm not sure how readily you can do this, is can you share websites to find the sex offenders and to search someone who may not be registered? Is there a way to search someone who is not registered?
I do not believe so.
think there
Now
is.
that New Jersey State Police website, the njsp.org, if they are registered in New Jersey, you could definitely find them on there. Geographical, a name search. But as far as I know, if they're not registered, I don't know. I can actually ask. I could ask the state police about that, but I don't think so.
And then if you find out anything differently, we can put that right on our website because we do record
Absolutely.
everything. Deb, thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And I think Nick has just some housekeeping things. Nick?
Yeah, so as Deborah was finishing up, I posted in the chat the link to the pre and post evaluation. Please take some time to fill that out. It only takes you a couple minutes, and you get a chance at winning a $100 gift card. And you need to fill that out if you want CEUs. I should be picking a winner of the gift card within the next couple days by the end of the week, and the winner will get an email with that gift card for Amazon. And I just want to thank everyone who made this possible. It was a great presentation. Thank you to Susan, Jean, Wendy, Alicia, Deborah for all of your informative presentations. They were amazing. We'll leave the Zoom call open until 1 o'clock, so you can click on those links. And I also posted in the chat a link to our next Lunch and Learn, which is kind of a shorter version of the parenting conference. It's one presentation from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock on May 19th. And it'll be about youth cultural competency. So please feel free to sign up. It's totally free. You get some chance at another gift card and one CEU for that. So thank you all for coming and have a great rest of your day.